Welcome back, Pokemon trainers, to our final round of Swiss here at Balance Patch. My name is Gabby Snyder, and I'm joined here by June Littner for what is going to be a very unique match.
Yeah, we one restricted Pokemon that we have seen on stream. Actually, I guess two restricteds that we've seen on stream already today.
Yeah.
Yeah, a team that we've seen already on stream, Rockwell.
And,
we saw
and
round
the other
one.
one too, I think.
Did we already see Ronald?
No, but we've seen.
Well, we've seen
the team.
They've seen the team already.
Yeah.
And looking at Ronald's team, might look pretty familiar. The same open team sheet, I believe, as the team that just finished second at the Birmingham Regional Championships, piloted by Oliver Escalin. It is the Calm Mind Kyogre Roaring Moon balance. I loved how this team looks.
I know. It's so flexible on paper because you look at it and you think to yourself, okay, well, I have really good speed control with the Roaring Moon. There's that natural synergy of utilizing booster energy and then having acrobatics get a power boost because of it. We've seen just how fast Roaring Moon is when it gets the speed boost off of booster energy. And then you have the Tailwind if you want more speed. And then you have all these Pokemon that can take advantage of it. And I think what's really unique about this team, and something that we were talking about a lot as we were waiting to come back on the air, is Rillaboom with drum beating. If Ronald has taken some notes from the Birmingham stream, it's probably going to be a very fast Rillaboom, which is something that, I don't know about you, June, but I wasn't necessarily expecting coming into this weekend.
Oh, no. Unless it's piloted by myself or Keon, I don't expect to ever see a Rillaboom that's faster than, say, 120 speed stat.
Yeah.
There's so many slow, bulky Rillabooms in Regulation G, because it just makes sense. You want a Pokemon that is very bulky, that's going to be able to switch into things like Miraidon, like Kyogre, and take multiple hits and pivot out pretty slowly. But on this team, a lot of speed, and we'll see if it's worthwhile, because on the other side, we're looking at a team that's pretty slow on paper.
I know. It's like you spend all this time highlighting the unique facts about the Kyogre team, especially since, these are some developments that have happened since the World Championships back in August. And then you're facing a hard Trick Room team, sort of. We have seen Rockwell on stream earlier in round one. I got to cast that with Jake, and we noticed that Rockwell actually ran the team without bringing the Dialga Origin form to the matchup, which was something very unique in the approach. In this matchup, though, I feel like you kind of want the Trick Room, and unfortunately for Rockwell, one of the best ways to get that up in a Pokemon that resists a lot of the attacks your opponent's bringing is going to be that Dialga Origin form.
Yeah, that is the big benefit of Dialga in general, and specifically the Dialga Origin.
Yeah.
Because of the form change, holding the Adamant Crystal, getting the extra 20 points in its special defense, as opposed, 20 points more than the base Dialga form.
Yes, yeah.
You are going to be in a great position against something like Kyogre, who is only attacking water and ice type moves. And granted, because you're a dragon type partly, you don't resist the ice beams, but a lot of ways to mitigate what this restricted Pokemon on the other side is going to do between the Dialga, the Walking Wake, and of course the Torkoal to set the sun.
Yes, and I do believe there's also an error on the team rendering, just to call it out. We do have a Psychic Terrain on that Indeedee. It is not on tempo, so just something to note. We did see that on stream earlier, so I feel like I was going to talk a little bit about the terrain interactions, especially with that Rillaboom, if that's something that these trainers decide to bring to this matchup, but I don't think it's really as... it's there.
It's there.
It's there.
So the Psychic Terrain does exist on Rockwell's team, and it could be very important.
It could be, yeah.
Two fake-out Pokemon on Ronald's side. There is an Urshifu that could be clicking Aqua Jets.
Yep.
There are all kinds of things that the Indeedee could do. I think mostly will be used as that follow me redirection Pokemon.
Of course, especially with that grass-type terrestrialization too. If Amoonguss is a big threat, which I would assume we will see, as that really is an anti-Trick Room Pokemon for a lot of trainers.
Yes. Getting into game one, excited to see how both these trainers will start things off, as it's going to be that Indeedee straight away on Rockwell's side, joined by the Fluttermane, looking across at the Urshifu, Rapid Strike, and Incineroar for Ronald's team.
So unfortunately for Ronald, this is not the lead that you want to see, as the Psychic Terrain should be able to stop any priority moves like Fake Out. Also, you can't Fake Out a Ghost-type Pokemon, and then that Fluttermane is also going to bring a lot of offensive pressure against these two Pokemon. So fortunately, Ronald could decide to pivot out here if that is an option, depending on what Pokemon he has in the back. Urshifu Rapid Strike with U-turn could be a very quick in and out. Of course, the Incineroar also has Parting Shot. So even though Ronald is in a bit of a tough position here, you really just have to predict what you think your opponent's going to, lock in on for damage, and just make sure that Pokemon's not on the field anymore.
Exactly. The problem is that Rockwell just has so many options,
Yeah.
especially out of this lead. Yes, you have your Scarfed Urshifu that is the fastest thing on the field for now, but the Indeedee has a very safe switch into something like the Torkoal, which will activate the Photosynthesis on the Flutter Mane, and I believe we saw in the round 1 when Rockwell was on stream, this Flutter Mane is going to get that speed boost because of Photosynthesis,
Yep.
will be the fastest thing if the sun goes up, and now you're threatening just really, really strong damage, and strong spread damage too, with that Dazzling Gleam.
Exactly, and it is worth mentioning that this Flutter Mane is holding choice specs, so you have that nice juxtaposition of you get the special attack boost thanks to your held item, and then the Sunlight brings with it a speedy boost. Not going to be happening just quite yet, though, as Amoonguss is the pivot for Ronald, and we get our first Terrestrialization on the field from Rockwell, turning that Flutter Mane into a full Fairy-type Pokemon, so further boosting those Fairy-type attacks like that Moonblast.
Yeah, and a very safe Terrestrialization for Rockwell, too, because of the Psychic Terrain. No chance for a Fake Out to go off into this Flutter Mane, even if Ronald expected the Terrestrialization to the Fairy typing. We do see a Follow Me from Indeedee, so keeping Flutter Mane safe if Urshifu did stay in, but you can just see, even into the resisted hit on Amoonguss, how much damage a spread Dazzling Gleam is still going to do to both of these Pokemon because of that choice specs. And with the Follow Me redirecting the Parting Shot, still going to be able to be at full special attack next turn to click the exact same move.
The nice thing about the Terrestrialization, though, for Ronald is that there is no opportunity now for the Indeedee to Terrestrialize into that Grass typing, which means the Amoonguss will eventually be able to land a Spore against the opposing Flutter Mane. It could be this turn, depending on what this Indeedee does, or it could be the following turn, assuming the Indeedee does go for Follow Me again. So just something to keep in mind. I do think that this Kyogre is in a bit of danger, though, given how much damage that Dazzling Gleam did the previous turn to the Incineroar.
Yeah.
But because Kyogre is going to be relying on Origin Pulse, as long as it's able to take one hit, it should be able to fire back some decent damage.
Yeah, it could be an opportunity as well if Ronald knows his Kyogre is extremely bulky, confident can take some hits, and knows that he's going to be able to get a Spore off eventually, to weave in a Calm Mind at some point. Because Kyogre ends up taking the attack pretty well, just about as well as Amoonguss does.
Yeah, and certainly better than the Origin Pulse into the Flutter Mane on the opposing side of the field.
Wow, yeah. Even with the Kyogre, which, again, you would assume would be trained very much in its bulk because of the leftovers, because of the Calm Mind, still able to put out a massive amount of damage with just that neutral Origin Pulse. And now Rockwell may be on the back foot just a little bit here. It took Ronald a couple of turns to find his footing and gave up a lot of information, revealing all 4 of his Pokemon and losing about 140% of the health total on his team. But now is in a position to get some big damage on the board, potentially put the Flutter Mane asleep, and start actually getting some momentum with this Kyogre.
Yeah, I think the other key thing to call out here is, as far as we are aware of, Rockwell does not have any opportunity to set Trick Room up at this point either. Going back to what we saw in round 1, the Indeedee and the Flutter Mane weren't necessarily an indication of a Trick Room-based approach for Rockwell in this matchup, and especially now that the Indeedee is fast asleep, it's going to be really hard for him to set up that speed control and find his way around the Pokemon on Ronald's side of the field.
Yeah, Rockwell, though, not worrying too much about finding his way around Pokemon, rather going through, KOing this Incineroar, and doing a ton of damage to Kyogre. Will end up losing the Flutter Mane for its troubles, but I think has more than done its job, taking the KO on the Incineroar, removing Ronald's options to switch around, play that pivoting balance game, and especially with an Amoonguss and the Drizzle ability for Kyogre, the fewer chances that Ronald has to pivot his Pokemon out and bring them back onto the field, the much better for Rockwell.
Agreed. I am curious to see what Pokemon Rockwell will have in the back, as if he did bring something like Torkoal, this would be a great opportunity to get it out onto the field. The Kyogre has already taken a significant amount of damage. We know the final 2 Pokemon on Ronald's side of the field, and that would be a great opportunity to utilize the Fire typing for some pressure. Instead, though, it's going to be that Walking Wake, which certainly will be the fastest Pokemon on the field right now, but may struggle to find any sort of footing against the Amoonguss.
Yeah, this Walking Wake, though, phenomenal into the Kyogre on the other side, which will of course force the Kyogre to switch out of this. Not really great damage for the Kyogre into the Wake, but Urshifu coming back onto the field. And we did see, I believe, Rockwell or Ronald lock into a terrestrialization of his own once we see the final Pokemon for Rockwell, and it is going to be finally on stream, the Origin Form Dialga.
You weren't kidding. That is a huge Pokemon.
It's massive. It's so big.
I wasn't expecting it. Admittedly, I've only encountered the Origin Form Pokemon in Pokemon Legends Arceus, which they're still big there, but they're still big there with the ability to kill me. So, you know, it's a little bit different.
It makes a little bit more
Anyways.
sense. But yeah, you think of Walking Wake as this behemoth from the past, but Origin Form Dialga getting onto the field and getting onto the field extremely safely. The
No
Indeedee
spore.
still asleep, so Rockwell making the call that Ronald won't spore into the Pokemon that's already asleep. And now 2 Pokemon for Rockwell that don't care too much about a Surging Strikes from this Urshifu and threaten a ton of damage, specifically onto this Amoonguss with that Flash Cannon from Dialga.
Yeah, and it really is going to be that Flash Cannon that makes the difference here. I was honestly surprised to see the terrestrialization on the Amoonguss. You know, it would have resisted a Fire-type attack thanks to that terrestrialization, but I don't think that's something Walking Wake wants to go for, assuming the rain is still on the field. You know, this Walking Wake in particular has Hydro Steam and Flamethrower in addition to Snarl, and it just seems like an unfortunate use of Terra now that this Amoonguss is going to be taking even more from Hydro Steam when the Walking Wake comes back out onto the field.
Yes. For now, though, I think the Amoonguss pretty content to just keep the Urshifu safe as the close combat goes into the Origin Form Dialga, just barely missing out on that one-hit KO. Rockwell likely knowing how bulky that Dialga is, knowing that it would be able to survive that attack, and firing back with the Flash Cannon onto the Amoonguss. But Ronald, I think, should be pretty excited about that turn of events. You now get the free switch in back to your Kyogre. You know that your Urshifu is the fastest thing on the field, and great time for Kyogre to come back onto the field as you're going to be able to reset up the rain.
Yes, because Dialga's HP is so low, Kyogre doesn't necessarily have to rely on an Origin Pulse in order to land that KO. Hypothetically, if the Indeedee wakes up this turn and goes for Follow Me, close combat picks up the KO, then Kyogre can just rely on Ice Beam to deal that 1 HP of damage. The Indeedee, however, does not wake up, which means the Urshifu should be able to target into that Dialga directly for the KO, but I think the result is going to be the same. Without the special defense boost the Indeedee had earlier, I think Kyogre is pretty much guaranteed to knock it out, assuming it can land a hit.
Yes, and you would think even with the special defense boost, the Indeedee with as little HP as it has, I would hope for Kyogre's sake that it's able to do 10% to this Indeedee. Now, though, all falls onto the shoulders of this Walking Wake, and really how well it's going to be able to take this Urshifu's close combat.
Yeah.
I am certainly interested in Rockwell's decision-making on not bringing the Torkoal in this game, with your 2 Photosynthesis Pokemon, not giving them an opportunity to be faster than this Choice Scarf Urshifu, will be guaranteed to get the close combat off into the Walking Wake. And the combination of the close combat plus this Ice Beam likely will just be enough to clean up this game for Ronald.
Yeah, and it's worth noting that the close combat does do about 80% health worth of damage, which Walking Wake can then fire back a knockout for. So that's really good information for game number 2. For now, though, this Ice Beam from the Kyogre should be enough to clean up the KO on this Walking Wake and bring Ronald up 1-0 in the set.
Yeah, and a really, really well-played game there for Ronald. We spoke at length prior to the game off-screen about how difficult this matchup is on paper for Ronald's team. You know, of course, you're a Kyogre player, and you're looking at 2 Dragon types, a Sunsetter, and, Hard Trick Room that an Ursaluna can come out at any point in time and just click Facade and one-hit KO your entire team. There are so many options that Rockwell has in this matchup, and just big credit to Ronald for being able to play around all of those things, utilize his terrestrialization. Maybe not the greatest in that game, but still got enough value out of each piece that he brought to come away with that win.
I almost think like the terrestrialization really didn't matter at the end of the day for Ronald. Like certainly the Amoonguss might have been around for 1 or 2 more turns had it kept that grass poison typing. However, at the end of the day, it was able to land that sleep against the Indeedee and really just open up the opportunity for the Urshifu and the Kyogre to round out the game. Going into game number 2, though, I mean, I feel like the simple adjustment, let's say, for Rockwell is to just rely a bit more aggressively on Trick Room. You know, Walking Wake is great on paper against a rain team, as Hydro Hydro Steam is a fantastic attack. It benefits from the sun or the water, or the rain. But in this particular case, I just don't think the Photosynthesis was the play. You know, you can bring your Torkoal, you can bring Dialga and Indeedee as the lead, so you can guarantee Trick Room. And then maybe just throw Ursaluna in there as well. Like you were saying, it does a ton of damage.
Yeah, the Amoonguss was a big, big problem for Rockwell in that first game, and a great answer to that is something that can't be spored. In that Ursaluna, once it gets burned from its Flame Orb and activates its Guts. And once it activates Guts, a Facade, there are no normal type resists on Ronald's side.
Are there any Ghost Terras either? I don't think so. Oh,
no,
well, there's Urshifu.
The Urshifu can Terastallize to a Ghost type, but that...
I guess and the Incineroar.
And the Incineroar.
But yeah.
But, again,
sorry.
the Terastallization, I don't know how big of a difference that would make for some of those Pokemon. The Urshifu, a Headlong Rush is still probably going to take care of that. For Rockwell, though, speaking about Terra, I think the Terastallization on the Flutter Mane immediately was extremely impressive for that first couple of turns, but just felt a little bit short-sighted for the rest of the game. As we do get into Game 2 of this contest, and similar lead, at least for Ronald and what he ended up going with, the Amoonguss and the Urshifu on the field next to each other, as it is that Indeedee and Dialga origin lead that you called out, Gabby.
Yeah, so the nice thing here is that, both these trainers are immediately threatening the other opponent. We have the threat of the Grass-type Terastallization on the Indeedee plus Follow Me to shut down the Amoonguss and the Urshifu to a certain extent. And then on Rockwell's side of the field, you have the threat of an immediate Trick Room. So I think we will see this game play out a lot differently, just given how much of a different lead this is. But I still Rockwell's game to decide to use Trick Room or not. And again, assuming how we saw Game 1, I would think that Trick Room would be a very comfortable adaptation for him going into this Game 2. But we'll just have to see how he chooses to approach the match.
Yeah, and really how he uses Terastallization, which looks like it's coming out here. If this is the Indeedee becoming a Grass type, which we are going to see, will Ronald call that? Is this potentially a U-turn and a Sludge Bomb into that
that's
Pokemon?
Very true.
There are some really intriguing offensive options that are not your immediate thought for the Urshifu and this Amoonguss. I believe we did see this U-turn locked in, and that's going to do just about half of Indeedee's HP pretty quickly there.
And it does give Ronald the opportunity to pivot into a different Pokemon that may also be able to handle the impending Trick Room a little bit better. So we'll have to see what he decides. I mean, we do have the benefit of seeing his thought process here, but for lack of spoilers for anybody who may be in the hall, I don't want to say anything until the Incineroar comes out onto the field.
Yeah, so we do see the Incineroar. It is going to be a solid option defensively here as Ronald, a very solid mid-ground play there. The U-turn plus the Spore, you at least force the Indeedee to click that Grass-type Terastallization to avoid any Pokemon falling asleep on Rockwell's side. But now this Origin Form Dialga, we'll see just how threatening this Pokemon is with that Adamant Crystal it's holding, giving its Dragon and its Steel-type moves a 20% boost in their power.
Yeah, the other thing I want to call out here, especially as we enter the first turn of Trick Room, is that it's almost to Ronald's benefit now that the Indeedee stays on the field for a little bit longer, as Rockwell will only be able to deal damage with the Dialga Origin. So you're only going to be able to target one Pokemon at a time because of that, and that does give you more time to play through Trick Room, which is exactly why we see Rockwell switch this Pokemon out, most likely into the Ursaluna, because if you don't get Spored this turn, which is a big risk, mind you, this is a very big prediction, now you're in a fantastic position to start going for Earthquakes. I mean, the poison isn't great either, but it's still going to activate that Guts ability at the end of the day.
Yes, it does put this Ursaluna on a little bit more of a timer. You're losing now 1/8 of your HP each turn instead of 1/16 from the burn that it would have gotten at the end of this turn. But regardless, still accomplishes what you needed to do.
Exactly.
And given the offensive options that Ronald has, which is to say the two strongest water types in the format, I don't know how much that extra, quarter of its HP by the end of this game is going to end up mattering against a lot of Pokemon on the other side that can just threaten one-hit KOs.
Exactly. Like, I think at the end of the day, you have to look at this as this Ursaluna has one Trick Room, most likely, to deal its damage and then get out of the way. And at the end of the day, the Poison versus Burn isn't really going to impact the 3 turns of Trick Room we have remaining.
An opportunity here now for both of these players to make some progress in this game, whether this is Ronald really committing to stalling out this Trick Room, you would likely think, the Kyogre probably faster than everything that Rockwell has shown so far.
I think so.
And the Urshifu definitely faster than everything that Rockwell has shown so far. Or Rockwell potentially getting in that Indeedee one more time to prevent any Amoonguss Spore shenanigans onto this Dialga Origin specifically. Though, if we're to say Ronald spores into the Dialga Origin, you open up an opportunity to click Facade into this Kyogre while the Amoonguss is not redirecting the Ursaluna's attacks. So a lot of things these players have to weigh, and for Ronald's side, really trying to play it safe with this Kyogre, get the Intimidate down onto this Ursaluna, and Spore right into this Dialga.
Yeah, it's a risky play, right? Like, I think you called it out perfectly when you said the Indeedee could come back into that spot. There was also the parting shot from the Incineroar in the previous turn that just adds even more pressure on there. But as you can see, just taking that risk, landing the Spore against the opposing Dialga Origin, and because of the Intimidate now, just being able to take that Earthquake pretty comfortably.
Yeah, of course, now you do still have another situation where Ursaluna can just click another Earthquake.
Oh,
You're going to be able to
100%.
deal a lot of damage here, and that's what this Pokemon does best, is under Trick Room. Rockwell played that very well to get the Ursaluna in position where it can just click attacks for about 3 turns. You're going to be able to pick up at least 1 KO, you would think. Whether it's this Incineroar that stays in this turn for the Earthquake, or if you're able to land a Facade into this Amoonguss, and if Dialga can wake up before 2 or 3 turns have passed,
Yeah.
all of a sudden now things get a whole lot more threatening. And we've still yet to see the 4th Pokemon on Rockwell's side, whether that is going to be something that would rather be in Trick Room or outside.
I'm very curious what that last Pokemon is, because at the end of the day, like, by keeping the Dialga on the field like this, you at least can keep clicking Earthquake pretty free. It looks like Ronald did predict a switch there, though, going for that Poison-type attack into the Steel-type Pokemon. But at the end of the day, I mean, this gets the knockout on the Incineroar. This Amoonguss does not have access to Protect, if I recall correctly. It does have, never mind. I was going to say, like, you can keep Earthquaking here, guarantee the KO on the Amoonguss the next turn, and had we seen a switch-in of the Urshifu or the Kyogre again, that's really valuable chip damage. So even though Rockwell is really not doing much of anything in these turns, Earthquake is doing enough to keep him in the game.
Yeah, and we have seen some very important speed interactions too
Yes,
on Rockwell's side, where the
yes.
Ursaluna under Trick Room is moving before the Dialga Origin.
Yep.
Allows you as Ronald to protect your Kyogre a little bit more this turn with a potential Rage Powder.
Yeah.
You can prevent a Facade or a Headlong Rush from going into the Kyogre. You would think a -1 Earthquake, even with the Guts boost, probably won't be enough to pick up this Kyogre from as healthy as it is. But for Rockwell, you're still putting on a lot of pressure
Yeah.
with this Ursaluna just to do as much damage as possible with,
Yeah.
I believe, the last turn of Trick Room.
Yeah, I think, I mean, at the end of the day, it's the Amoonguss that really is the more interesting Pokemon to me at this point in time, and I think that Ronald made a great call here by switching it out so that it gets the HP recovery back with that Regenerator ability. This will give Ronald the opportunity to redirect those attacks later. Probably would have appreciated that Dialga staying asleep for one more turn. However, the Kyogre does still have Rain boosting its damage. Origin Pulse does get the target against the Ursaluna, which is arguably the bigger threat at this point in time, and is really setting himself up to be successful once the Twisted Dimensions do return to normal. So
Yeah.
still a bit of an uphill battle for both of these trainers, and it really comes down to what that final Pokemon Rockwell has. But I think Ronald has done a great job of ensuring that at least his offensive pressure really is still as strong as it's been since the beginning of this game.
Absolutely, and this is the position that all Kyogre players dream of.
Yes, yeah.
You've got no Trick Room set up, you've got your 2 Water-type sweepers in the rain on the field at the same time. For Ronald, now things really have just flipped.
Yeah.
You can now put on your offensive pressure with a potential close combat and an Origin Pulse. Would be interested to see, based on the damage that the U-turn did to the Indeedee, I would assume that close combat would be enough to KO it from this range.
Yeah.
The problem is, similarly to Rockwell's speed tiers on his side, the Urshifu moving first means that if this is a follow me from the Indeedee, that is going to be the attack that gets redirected. And the Kyogre, as we've mentioned time and time again, does not have great damage into the Dialga Origin.
Yeah, and the Kyogre as well. It's going to be forced to rely on Origin Pulse here, which I think we saw Ronald walk into. You're going to have to land that attack. I mean, especially the fact that U-turn just missed the KO on that Indeedee. Barely. You really want to lock in that KO and force out the final Pokemon for Rockwell so you can figure out just how you're even going to approach this endgame. because we saw him go for Trick Room already. Is he going to try to Trick Room again? Is that going to be another Trick Room sweeper? Is it Torkoal? Like, we just don't know at this point in time.
Yes, we do see, though, the critical hit landing with the Origin Pulse onto the Dialga could be very important. Every bit of damage matters onto a Pokemon as bulky as Dialga, and it is going to be a Trick Room. I would imagine then we are going to see this Torkoal finally hit the field.
And that's just great information management for Rockwell. Unfortunately, the fact that Ronald has 3 Pokemon remaining does mean that Ronald is essentially guaranteed to win the Weather War. All you have to do is give up your Choice Scarf for Shifu, which you're probably not going to be doing much in Trick Room anyways this turn, but will give himself an out here, which is the most important thing.
Yes, so we do see finally confirmation of that 4th Pokemon. It is the Torkoal. Important to note, too, that because Indeedee fainted on that past turn, this Dialga, who was parting shot by the Incineroar on Ronald's side
a long time ago.
Maybe turn 2 of this game, that sticks now. This Dialga locked onto the field at -1 special attack, and this Torkoal not holding a damage-boosting item like the Charcoal or the much more honest Flame Plate, as we have sometimes seen.
Much more honest.
That's my agenda, and I'm going to keep pushing it.
You know, I respect that, June. I respect that.
And it is going to be just as you said, Gabby, the Shifu coming onto the field. Not a great situation for it in the sun and with Trick Room up, but a likely just looking for a way to stall out some turns as the Lava Plume comes out from this Torkoal.
Yeah, so this is another unique utilization of the telepathy ability that the Dialga Origin form has, is Lava Plume will target all Pokemon on the field, including your partner. Also has a higher than normal burn chance. It's a 1 in 3 chance approximately. So we see that proc immediately on the Urshifu, but I think most importantly, allows you to deal some good damage to the Amoonguss, allows you to threaten damage onto the Kyogre, and also potentially put these Pokemon on a timer. I'm very curious to see the speed interactions here between the Torkoal and the Amoonguss as well. You know, if this Torkoal has the lowest possible speed ever, it's not necessarily something to write home about. However, we have seen some people running very unique speeds on Pokemon like Torkoal and Amoonguss, depending on what the team has. And given that Rockwell teams in particular has these faster Pokemon that like to utilize the sun, I wouldn't be surprised if we see a bit of a unique Torkoal here.
Absolutely. Important to note, too, contrary to that game 1, Ronald has held on to his Terastallization so long in this game. So in being able to reset the rain up here, Ronald also still has the option to Terastallize this Amoonguss, become the Fairy type. So now this Torkoal doesn't have the sun on its side and will not be able to hit any of these Pokemon now super effectively. A great use of the Terastallization in this situation for the Amoonguss to survive any potential attacks from this Torkoal, barring maybe a Clear Smog critical hit.
It would have to be like a super critical hit, I think, honestly, as this Amoonguss is pretty healthy. Instead, it is going to be overheating. That's not going to do enough damage, and Amoonguss is going to be able to fire back an attack of its own, targeting a Spore onto the opposing Dialga Origin, who failed the double protect.
Yes, and a really unfortunate failure of the double protect there for Rockwell, because not only did Dialga fall asleep this turn, but because the protect moved before the Spore came out, didn't even get to burn the mandatory turn of sleep on this turn. Now it's a -2 special attack Torkoal and a Dialga that's guaranteed to be asleep on this turn, staring down this Kyogre in the rain. Not a great situation, as you see just how little damage that Lava Plume is going to do. Spore can come out freely into the Torkoal, and as long as the Kyogre is able to land its attacks, should be pretty easy for the water types on Ronald's end to clean this game up.
The nice thing about Kyogre is that, you know, it is so powerful. It gets the 1-hit knockout on the Torkoal. It looks like it's about a 2-hit knockout on the opposing Dialga at this point in time, assuming there still is a partner on the field. And that's why trainers keep coming back to Kyogre, despite the fact that Origin Pulse is not the most accurate move. You know, and I find it interesting that, you know, Ronald's clearly doing very well here this weekend with this team. We saw Oliver Eskelin get second in Birmingham with the Calm Mind Origin Pulse Kyogre. I think it just goes to show that even if you are playing like these riskier strategies, you can still hit that damage output you need for it to be effective.
Absolutely, and that's one of the things that we've seen the top-level Kyogre players say time and time again is, yeah, I can miss 1 or 2 Origin Pulses in a game. As long as I hit 1 or 2 in addition to that, it's usually fine, just because it does so much damage. And that goes to show why we've seen so many of them. There are 5 Kyogres here today out of 17 Masters players.
I'm scared about what that means for next weekend, honestly, for our first North American regional.
Yeah, it's a very, very popular Pokemon at this point in the metagame, which is something that I certainly did not expect.
Yeah.
You know, Terapagos had seen a big rise in usage prior to any majors once Regulation G came back.
Yep.
You've seen Miraidon, of course, was the World Championship winning team and just won another major event again today. So there are all kinds of Pokemon that Kyogre really doesn't love to stare down, and yet it's still seeing a lot of success, just like we saw here today.
Yeah, and I think one thing that I want to spend some time with later is just how much the support of Incin, how much the support of Rillaboom, the Urshifu, Amoonguss, like those are all very tried and true Pokemon in the VGC metagame. Like how much they're lifting Kyogre up as well.
Yes.
But that's something that we can talk about later as we are now done with our Swiss rounds here. And I don't know about you, but I think everybody's ready to start with Top Cut. So that's enough from us here now. We'll be back with Top Cut real soon.